We're about ready to embark on brew day. So if you look in the timeline lecture, there are 3 timelines. We're going to loosely follow the one, number 2, which is titled No Chill, Real Wort Starter, Keg Firm. First thing we need to do is run our water, and for the brew session we need 27 liters or 7 gallons. It takes a little bit of time to run it through the charcoal filter at about 1 liter per minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the water, set a timer, and then go weigh our grains. For the cheap ass amber we're making, we're going to use 3 kilograms of pale, 1 kilogram of light Munich, as well as 500 grams of Cara Munich 3. After we're done weighing the grains, let's go ahead and check on that water. Alright, the grains have been weighed and our water's been run. We ran 7 gallons or 27 liters of water. But since I'm on city water source, I need to treat this with Camden. Okay, we're going to have this Camden tablet. We're only going to use half, so take half of it, find a shot glass because I'm sure you got one, take the butt end of a knife and mash it up. Then take that, put it in your water, and give it a stir. As per the timeline, we're going to wait until tomorrow to use this water, but you could go ahead and use this now. Before you kick on the heat, you want to make sure they have all your prep done before you need to go touch anything that's hot. So we're going to run this bungee cord around it and then throw our stainless steel strainer at the bottom. Kick on the flame. If you've got an immersion heater, you can throw that in there too to help out the cause. But in the meantime, we're going to go mill some grains. Milling grains is as easy as firing up your food processor or blender. Resist the urge to fill it all the way up to the top because what we're going for is kind of a uniform crush. So I found that about a cup and a half of grains, and at 5 seconds, works perfectly. And it doesn't take as long as you'd think. We've reached our strike temperature of 74 C, so I've killed the heat source, and in the next shot I'll bring you in for the dough in. You want to add grains in a relatively speedy fashion. The longer that we have the pot open and exposed, the more quickly we'll lose temperature. At the same time, you don't want to add grains so quickly where you can't fully saturate the grains. This will lead to dry pockets in the mash called dough balls. This will affect our efficiency. For this beer's mash temperature, we are shooting for anything in the high 60s Celsius or mid 150s F. We did strike at 74 Celsius or 165 F, which is what the brew toad had prescribed. After some stirring, everything has reached an equilibrium temperature-wise, so it's important to take a mash temperature. In this situation, it's 69 Celsius, which is a degree higher than we want it to be. This isn't a big deal. We will just note that next time, in the same situation, assuming the same water volume, same grain weight, same ambient temperature, we will strike with water at 73 Celsius instead of 74. We are 30 minutes into the mash and it's time for us to do a check. What we're checking on is the stability of the mash temperature. As you do this more and more times, it becomes less and less of an issue, especially if you insulate. One of the beauties of brewing a bag, and brewing 5 gallons that is that we can add heat to it when need be. And we also want to stir to distribute the heat. We are at 68 degrees Celsius, which means we've lost a degree in the half hour. No problems there, we're going to leave it at that. So let's go ahead and seal it up. Finish our hour mash, come back in 30 minutes and lift the bag and start our boil. For some, brewing in a bag or brewing in a t-shirt in a small kitchen might be their only option. Unfortunately, in my kitchen, I've got a very short hood fan and I've got a very tall pot, so I have to make other accommodations. So what you're going to see is I moved the pan or the pot over here, and I'm going to lift the bag over here and drain it and then put it back on the stove. So you pull the bag and you're going to let it drain. Having a strainer that fits your pot well is very important. If it's too big, then the wort will drip on the outside and leave you with a mess. If it's too small, then you can't let it hang. So we need to let a little of this drain out. And if you got a strong stir spoon, you can drape it around here too and let it suspend that way. And that can get you the grains a little bit lighter, then you can pull it up and put your strainer underneath. And it's fairly reasonable right now, so I'm going to go ahead and make that move. It's any means necessary to get this drained, so that includes kind of giving it a squeezing action. That helps out quite a bit. As well as, when you get to the very, very end and you got nothing left, take your pot lid and push against it too. After you've collected 6.5 gallons or 25 liters of wort, you're done with the grains. Most people usually pitch them in the garbage, but there's actually a few things you can do with them. For example, they're good in compost. Chickens love them at about a pound per day per chicken actually. Or you can use them in spent grain recipes. For example, on ibrewbeer.com, I have a recipe for spent dough pizza grain, which I cook in the cast iron. So let's go ahead and remove these grains and move our brew pot up to the heat source and start our boil. While not listed on your graphic, taking a pre-boil gravity reading is a pretty good habit to get into. This can tell you if you kind of shit the bed in the mash, came out too low, or maybe you need to supplement with some DME, or maybe you want to pull back on the hops. Just another way to kind of give us a checkpoint throughout our brew day. In order to do this, we need to pull a sample of wort from the kettle. You could use a coffee cup, because anything that's going to go in there needs to be heat tolerant. But this takes a while to cool down. Instead, if you have a Moscow Mule cup, this will work really well. So you only need to pull about 6 ounces or 200 milliliters, but you can't take the sample immediately because, again, it's hot and it will break your hydrometer. So what you need to do is put it in a cold water bath, stir it around, or just replace the water a couple times, and the transfer from the wort to the copper to your water will take it down to hopefully 68F 20C, and at that point you can take a hydrometer reading. Now I've taken the pre-boil gravity reading and that came out to 1043. Remember that the pre-boil gravity is not what you're going to start at, because we have to go through the action of boiling. Through boiling we have evaporation, which means we condense the wort, we condense the strength. So we are on par for our 1050, which is great. So we can pitch that back into here. And as we wait for this to come up to boil, we can go ahead and prepare our first hop addition for 60 minutes. As you reach boil, now's a good time to put in FermCap if you use FermCap. Otherwise, this is the cheap-ass amber, and as part of the cheap-ass amber, we went really limited on the hops addition to keep the cost low. If you look on the Brew recipe, it's 14 grams, which is next to nothing for price. Here are my magnums of 14 grams. I'm going to add those at 60 minutes. Then we start our clock now. In the meantime, it's a good idea to run some sanitizer because everything post-boil needs to be sanitized, and this is kind of a downtime that we're just going to kind of wait for things to progress along. So I'll check back with you in a bit. I've just flamed off, and there's one last thing to do before we seal this up, before we get back at it tomorrow, is we're going to whirlpool. We're going to stir like hell in one direction, and hopefully all the break material will make a nice little cone in the center. That means we can snake our racking cane down the side and hopefully make a clean transfer. So please excuse my noise. And on 5 gallons, it doesn't take a lot of effort to really get it going. Now with this going, you want to take your sanitized top, put it on top of your kettle, and I like to lock it down with a heavy object such as a brick. And in theory, because it's winter time and the apartment's cold, we'll finish here at about 6 p.m. and then tomorrow morning, maybe 6 or 8 a.m., we'll be at pitching temperature. So I'll see you then. It's the following morning and we're going to go check on our kettle. It's important that we kind of take care of everything that we need to do before we open this up, because there are yeast in the air that would love to ferment this just as much as the beer yeast that we have. So I've run some sanitizer here. I've got all my tools sanitized, and touching the side, I know that it's about room temperature, and it's been about, I guess, 16 hours since we flamed off. So we're going to open it up, take a gravity reading, take the temperature reading. If the temperature is appropriate, then we'll transfer it to our keg and add our yeast and start our keg ferment. But first we need to open it up and check those two vitals. Okay, you'll see that the hydrometer is leveled out at 1052, which is just 2 points over what we were hoping for. That's great. And I took a temperature reading on the side, and it says that we're at 18 Celsius, which is about, I think, 65 degrees, so it's perfect. Remember, it's wintertime here and our apartment's pretty cool, so it wasn't all that much of a stretch to assume that overnight we get down to pitching temperatures. So we're going to pull back and we'll rack from the kettle into the keg. Worth mentioning, when I pull the hydrometer out of the kettle, I like to take a kind of a taste off the hydrometer to kind of evaluate, you know, obviously it's not your finished beer, but if something went horribly, horribly wrong, you can kind of evaluate, like, you know, and figure out where in the process maybe that happened. Anyways, the beer tastes great, the amber tastes great. So we've got all of our gear prepped here. Got the stainless steel racking cane, your silicone hose, the clip here, and then the T-ball strainer. And we're going to carefully insert it and try to keep it on the edge of the kettle, because remember, we did that whirlpool, and hopefully there's a cone in the center that we're going to try to avoid. Buried it to the bottom. Open up your sanitized keg. And start your siphon. And this is the only time you want to intentionally oxygenate. So this kind of demon drop here into the keg, you can hear it splashing. That'll aerate, sorry, aerate is the correct term. So we're about ready to pitch the yeast, and there's something that we need to do, and it's absolutely imperative, is we're going to hit the keg with FermCap, 2 drops per gallon, which is 10 drops. What this does is it keeps the fermentation action at bay and won't jam up our poppet and build pressure. Okay, so there's the 10 drops there. And remember, we did start a parallel yeast starter, also called a RWS, real wort starter, and that has gone term. Cloudy, but we're just going to pour off the top part of the beer, top part of the yeast starter rather. You keep enough liquid there to pull out the stuff from the bottom. And then again, Nottingham, pretty compact yeast cake here, so get the keg lid, and then you need to grab a CO2 source and set the lid 30 psi. You could use your CO2 charger. I don't want to open up another container, so I'm going to grab a bulk source. So I'm going to set the lid right now. Assuming you aerated, we're going to go ahead and set the lid here. And remember, to set a lid, we hit it with 30 psi. And you can hear that little bump, and that means the lid got enough pressure to set up against the rim here. Okay, let's go ahead and set up our fermentation water bath as well as our spunding valve. Okay, so after you've got the lid set, you're going to need to run a water bath for your keg. This can be a little bit tedious. It's like blending hot and cold water, but basically you want to pick a fermentation temperature. I prefer to start at maybe 17 Celsius, 62F, 18 Celsius, 64F, and blend up some water, basically enough water that it won't float your keg. After you've got that set, you want to put on your spunding valve, and if you look at the spunding valve video, I show you how to set it, and choose your prescribed PSI, put it on there, and then you're good to go. So what's going to happen in here pretty quickly, actually, because we have a yeast starter that's ready to rock, it's going to start fermenting, and it's going to come up to a certain PSI, and it's going to bleed off. So as far as location goes, you want to choose a location in your house that's pretty stable and cooler. It's winter time right now, so pretty much the whole apartment would work, but if it were in the summertime, maybe not the summertime, probably spring or fall, maybe a closet or the like. But otherwise, we can come back in 7 to 10 days and drink this beer, or we can wait a little bit longer and have a higher quality product.